Welcome to PostgresOpen. Our next session will be with Pavlo Golub from Cybertech, and he will be talking about running PostgreSQL on Windows.
Welcome and hello. My name is Pavlo Golub, and I'm a senior database consultant in Cybertech. Well, I was a developer, and I work with Postgres for 17 years already, starting with 7.3. So about Cybertech, about my company, we do a lot of stuff. We have international team of developers, and this year our company will turn 20. And we have 4 official offices around the world. Our headquarters is in Austria. We have office in Estonia, which is for Nordic countries. Also, we have office in Switzerland and in Montevideo, Uruguay. And I hope we will have office somewhere in the United States. So. There are some of our clients, so please choose your fighter. We do in any sectors, from education to government, industry, and all. Okay. So we do training, we do tuning, we do development, replication, any kind of services, as well as artificial intelligence, big data, machine learning, and so on and so on. And I want to invite you all to the PostgreSQL Conference Europe. I hope see you all on October 15 or 16, because 15th is the day of trainings and so on. So, intro. Why anyone wants to run PostgreSQL under? Okay. Open. Okay. So, why does anyone want to run PostgreSQL under Windows? Is it faster? Is it safer? Is it better? And on that question, we have old enough answer from Magnus Hegender, who is one of the authors of Windows port. So he said, PostgreSQL will definitely run faster on Linux than on Windows because it was designed for a Unix-style architecture. And it implements the same architecture on Windows, which means it does a number of things that Windows isn't designed to do well. For example, we all know that PostgreSQL uses processes instead of threads, and if you make a lot of connection and disconnection on Windows, probably your system won't like it. And I asked another expert in IO stack, Ilya Kosmodymiansky, what about IO stack? And he said that when PostgreSQL was ported, the old IO stack was probably taken into account, if any, probably. So nobody knows. And 10 maybe years ago, many people were asking about when 64-bit Windows will arrive. And that time, Magnus and Gunder said that probably there is no need in such 64-bit Windows binaries, but we will see how that changes. Okay, history. I did my research using official PostgreSQL docs. We have a release changelog. And also, I've used Bucardo Postgres old version changelog. It's very useful in the meaning that all changelogs are listed on one HTML page. So you may just Control F and watch for whatever change and when and how and by whom it was applied. So, okay, first mention of Windows specific code, well, in 6.1 by Bruce Momjan, and he just removed all the Windows specific code from PostgreSQL. Well done, Bruce. The next one, 6.4 by Magnus Gunder. So libpq, our client library, can now may be compiled on Windows. So if you are expert enough and you may run Cygwin or Borland C, maybe you heard of that company. So probably you can compile client library only for that time. Yes?
It seems like Magnus Hagander is mentioned a bunch. What's his background?
Sorry?
It seems like Magnus Hagander is mentioned a bunch. What's his background? Or like, where's he worked? Or
Oh, I don't know. Really.
He's one of the core contributors on Postgres.
I mean, at that time,
He works for Red Bull Info now, but I don't know.
yeah. It's not 10 years, 11 years ago, so I have no idea what was the time. Okay, 6.9, Magnus Hagander with Daniel Horak. So they added Windows NT port, and again, this is not official support, but binaries can be built. Okay, 7.0, now it's official. So libpq client library for Windows can now be officially built on for PostgreSQL. It's 19 years ago, 2000. So 2 years later, 7.2, there were some fixes in Cygwin and Windows ports. I will tell about Cygwin later, what is it and what for. So we fixed some socket communication layer in whatever. 7.3, Bruce. He added several functions to client library called libpq. And there were some other fixes to simplify working of PostgreSQL on the Windows. It's still 17 years ago. And if you remember, 7.3 introduced schemas and a lot of major changes. So I think that 7.3 is the most fantastic and the best release in the whole history of PostgreSQL. 7.4, Bruce helped us a lot and added pq-freemem function, which was suggested for Notify, but is very useful also for other memory management, because as you know, or maybe you don't know, on Windows you cannot free memory which is allocated in another. You cannot free memory in client library if it was allocated in the server, in the backend itself. So added some compatibility functions and allow client interfaces to compile on the min-GUI. Min-GUI stands for minimal GNU for Windows. I will tell about that later. And at last, 8.0, which is 2005. We have a native Microsoft Windows server, the first release, which is natively run runs on Microsoft Windows as a server, and it runs like as a service, not as a standalone applications. The same release introduced the installer for that, and so on and so on. And again, Magnus, who is to blame? Now 8.1. So again, these entries are the most interesting from the all changelog for me. But so, for example, allow UTF-8 to work on Windows. The thing is that internally Windows uses UTF-16, so there was some work to apply that. Kerberos 5 support. Now libpq client library is thread safe thanks to Dave Page, and IPv6 is introduced. Andrew, I hope it's Andrew Dunstan. Yeah, that man, please. Thank you. 8.2, a lot of changes. But the most is that now PostgreSQL is officially built with Microsoft Visual C, or Visual Studio nowadays. There are some fixes for pgdump, for support for locales, especially for Slavonic ones, and some stability fixes and internal semaphore implementation, and so on and so on. And it is still 13 years ago. 8.3, native SSPI Windows authentication added, so it was a real improvement, especially for guys that were working with Active Directory. So the whole distribution now is officially compiled with Microsoft Visual C. Improvement in memory usage, regression tests, native shared memory implementation, and so on. 8.4, not much, except that time T is now the same for all platforms. So some platforms were using time T as a 32-bit and some 64, and Tom did it in one way. So from that time, all time T are renamed to PG time T type, and there always be 64 bits. 9.0, write to Windows event log in UTF-16. As I said, Windows support UTF-16 internally. And now we see that this release introduced 64-bit Windows. I don't think, yes, it was official. And now we should use Visual Studio 2008. In 9.1, new authentication method add. And in that release, support for service was added. And the most interesting in that release is the support for MinGW64, which is the ancestor of MinGW, and that allowed building 64-bit Windows binaries even on non-Windows platforms via Crosscompiling. That was amazing. Thanks, Andrew, by the way. So 9.2, not much. 9.4, not much. 9.5, oh. So some fixes and allow PGCTL event source login, which means that PGCTL runs service, and that service might want to write to the event log, and to allow to distinguish that entries in event log, there was implemented one more parameter. Base backup, fixed, and high precision timestamp resolution also introduced. 10, all functions must be marked as the export, and some other internal stuff by Anders Freund, by the way. He did a lot, but it's too hard to understand because it's really internal stuff. Okay, so in 12, PG test fsync were fixed, and in 12, we don't know officially released it yet, but in 12, our sources, our PostgreSQL sources will require C99 compliant compiler, and probably that will be Microsoft Visual Studio 13 and higher. Okay, so what the path on Windows? First mentioned in 6.1 by Bruce. Thanks, Bruce. Official client support in 7.0, 20 years ago, maybe even more. Full official support in 8.0, 64-bit support in 9.0. So, Windows packages or installers or binaries or whatever. Publishers, we have the only official installer listed on PostgreSQL.org, and that package, that installer made and produced by EnterpriseDB. Some time ago, we had another one by BigSQL, but it is not listed as official anymore, and that probably due to the fact that they dropped support for Windows and some other platforms with version 10, 9.6 and lower, and from what I saw, they have now only Postgres 11 and 12 installers, which is not good to be official publisher. And of course, we have a non-vanilla PostgreSQL, a lot of them, just like EnterpriseDB Advanced Server, Postgres Pro, or PowerGres. But what if we want to use only client binaries on our machine? What if we don't need a Postgres server, Postgres backend? So in Linux world, we usually split this into several packages. For example, I hope that Ubuntu, we have package for client tools and libraries. We have a core database server package, contrib package with supplied models and so on. And we have development with libraries and headers and so on. What about for Windows? In Windows world, as you remember, we have only one installer from EnterpriseDB. And if you want to install client only, you anyway should download the whole installer and just pick the last string, command line tools, and that will be okay. But I think that's overkill to download 2 megabytes of binaries for just installing maybe 5 megabytes of clients and libraries. Okay, but we have another options. We may download just binaries, which are packed in one archive. Then our actions are pretty straightforward. We run initdb to initialize a new data dir for new cluster. Then to start that cluster, we use pgctl. And if we want to use service for PostgreSQL, we may run pgctl. Oh, okay, misprint. pgctl register, but we don't need to, because PostgreSQL is running well without adding any additional information to registry or to any other places inside the system. And that algorithm is fine enough if you want to deploy the PostgreSQL server inside of your application or whatever, but probably you want to start server not on the default port to avoid conflicts with already present installations. Okay, so what is it running on Windows? How is it different from running on other systems? So first of all, let me introduce you to the concept of service in the Windows world. So service, it's just a computer program that operates in the background and it implements special API, so-called services API. And it handles low-level tasks in that way, so no user interaction needed. And it's mostly similar to concept of Unix daemon. And of course, it started by the one parent services.exe. It processes and launches, and it manages their actions, and so on and so on. Usually, services are started during boot up, and they are running in the background until the end of time. But of course, you may stop, pause, and restart them. So to make the things happen in that way, we have special command PostgreSQL register, which registers the PostgreSQL server as a system service on Windows. In that particular mode, we have several major parameters. S means start mode. Will it be auto, or do we need started manually? E, which means source, that was about putting event source to event log. So by default, it's PostgreSQL. So we have servers and we have a PostgreSQL itself, and they both may write to event log. So to distinguish them, we may want another name, and it's a service name. Of course, we have unregistered mode, and we have PostgreSQL kill, which stands as signal to a specified process. Why that? Because, as Magnus said, Windows has 3 signals and none of them works, and that is true. Windows is not a POSIX compliant system, and Windows has no signals. Well, it has, but they're for debugging mostly. So, of course, Windows does not have a built-in kill command. Windows is using concept of messages, and there are 2 APIs like send message and post message. But Windows has 3 signals for console applications. One is Control-C event, when you push Control-C, Control-break the same. And third, I have no idea what is that. I should ask Magnus about it. To emulate that behavior, there is a kill mode in PostgreSQL. So when we want to behave in the same way as in Linux or POSIX style system, we may call PostgreSQL kill, then signal name and process ID. And that is a very useful thing when you want to try port or update already written applications. I had to do this with Patroni. They are using signals a lot, and that time when I was working on that port for Windows, I rewrite all the calls with PostgreSQL kill, and thankfully it is working. We'll see. Okay, the other interesting things is path delimiters and the path itself. For example, if I will enter in PostgreSQL conf, log directory is C temp boom. I know that's a strange name, but you will later understand why. and log file name pg%a, which means the day of the week. And I want to start, I will have an error which say could not open log file C, then whatever, imum. How do you think, what's wrong here? Yes, it's escaping. PostgreSQL conf allows escaping. So if you want to write that kind of slash, you should double it. In that case, the first /t were transformed to tabulation, and the second /b was transformed to backspace. That's why we have no b, but we have tab here. By the way, if you want to use Unix separator, you may use that. PostgreSQL is fine with that. And you can mix them, but please do remember that you need to double all slashes in the configuration files. And the thing is that that fact isn't listed in a manual, which is not good. And of course, I wanted several times to provide a patch, but I had no time, as usual. Only in one place I saw that example of escaping or doubling this slash. It's about archive command, where there is example for Linux and example for Windows. But if you have no idea where to look to, you will never know until you're trapped into this situation. Okay, shared buffers. For a long time, shared buffers were supposed that they are not as effective as on Linux. So maybe you may find better results keeping them relatively low and let operating system, Windows, cache more. And for a long time, considered shared buffers to be from 64 megabytes to 512. And that was true until the version 10. So starting from version 10, this statement is absent in documentation. But it's still present in some wiki pages, and it's still present in the user guide of Enterprise DB Advanced Server. Who knows? We need more information about that. Why? Because in version 10, huge pages were implemented for Windows. In Windows world, they are called large pages, and you need some user rights for that. And if you want to run it from command line, there are some interesting stuff you should do. You should run it as an administrator or disable user access control, and so on and so on. The author of that patch said that improvement of using large pages was about 2%. But that was a synthetic test built on PG Bench. And later in that thread, Andres Freund probably said that there are some configurations that maybe allow to have a 15% of improvement, but that improvement were gained on Linux platform. And to know if we can gain that on Windows, we need to check that with the high value for shared buffers, something like 60 gigabytes or whatever. So nobody tested it. Yeah. Yes.
My general advice to people these days, and this goes for Unix as well as for Windows, is that you actually need to benchmark this on your application, because I don't think there is any universal answer anymore to what a good value for shared buffers is.
Yep.
And I went through an exercise about a year ago with a very large client where they effectively they triangulated over quite a wide range of
Thank you. Okay, shared memory type, not so much choice. Default value is Windows, of course, and I don't think you want to try to other options, because maybe the one more is supported as sysv, but a lot of bad things might happen, so the same rule applies to the dynamic shared memory type parameter. Disk effective cache size. This parameter is used for estimations only, so it's not that if you set it to a very aggressive number and your system will die. No. So the conservative setting is half of memory available, more aggressive in 3/4. But you may try to count your estimate, to calculate your estimate. Well, in Windows, you of course should use Task Manager. You go to Performance Memory tab and just add 2 numbers, cached memory and available memory, and just set it. Okay, Unix socket directories. Why this parameter is listed here? Well, this parameter is for a directory which hold the Unix domain sockets and so on and so on. Unix domain socket is a standard component of POSIX system. Windows is not POSIX compliant, so this parameter is irrelevant on Windows and ignored, and that is bad because many applications, for example Patroni, fall back to Unix sockets when they cannot connect using network. And I spent a lot of time to disable this behavior, and then one day Peter Eisentraut provided work-in-progress patch for Unix socket directory support on Windows. So probably in the next major release, maybe we will have that functionality, and that's good. I'm not the expert in authentication methods, but there are some native. The first one is SSPI, and as far as I know, it falls and GSS API is coming. Okay, so when you're running PostgreSQL, you probably want to deal with Windows Defender, and also known as anti-malware service executable. It may take a lot of CPU and memory during PostgreSQL run because it's very tricky to explain that our server creating a lot of files and doing some stuff is not looking suspicious. So possible workarounds, just disable real-time protection. Not the best choice, I would say, but you may create exclusions. So there are 4 kinds of exclusions: folder, process, files, and extension. So I think that most simple way is just exclude folder and process itself. Well, the same rules apply for other antivirus software. If you have one, I don't think you have. Okay, running now building on Windows. Okay, so the official way is Visual Studio, and the official manual recommend to use Visual Studio Express 2019. For now, it's possible to build with the Microsoft Visual Studio 2005 to 2019, but as you saw, the next major release will probably make the minimal version to 2013. The bad things are that binaries are dependent on a redistributable package, so-called VC redist. In this case, it's 86, but for 64 binary, it will be another name. And of course, the official installer and binaries are built using Visual Studio. There are some other way to build PostgreSQL and related stuff. So one of them is mean GW, which states for minimal GNU for Windows, and MCS. So MinGW doesn't have a Unix simulation layer, so it's not trying to be POSIX compatible. And it not depend on any C runtime, so no other DLL will be injected. So you may think of MinGW as a compiler and the libraries and headers, and to provide a not POSIX-like environment, we are using MCS. MCS is just a collection of tools, GNU tools, with script interpreter. In this case, it's Bash, which of course is not available on Windows. So MCS doesn't contain any compiler or whatever, just a shell with tools inside it. And MinGW itself is a compiler with some headers, libraries, and so on. And so the bad thing about MinGW that we can build only 32-bit programs. There is no support for 64. That's why we have MinGW, Windows 64, and MCS2. MCS2 is another independent fork of MCS, but it's based more on modern Cygwin. I will tell about Cygwin later, but it's POSIX compatibility layer. And of course, MCS2 is using MinGW 64, which allows us to build as 32-bit programs and 64-bit programs. And MinGW 64 supports cross-compiling, and MCS2 introduces Pacman package manager. So it's much more easier to choose what packages do you need for development. For example, OpenSSL develop or Pthread or zlib or whatever. And what is interesting that MCS2, some effort were made to make it work with Windows native programs, not only with the tools that are included in MCS, but you can call some native external for MCS2, external but internal for Windows tools. Okay, so that's how cross-compiling. It's Ubuntu I support, so we are just installing MinGW 64, then we download the process, git clone or tarball or whatever, and then we just run configure with host specified. You see that there are different for 32 bits and for 64, and then we just execute make and we are fine. Cygwin, unlike of MCS and MCS2, tries to bring a POSIX-compatible environment to Windows, which means that you feel like you are working inside a POSIX environment, and for that, it provides a compatibility layer library called Cygwin 1 DLL. It's still alive, but I don't think anyone should use it nowadays, except to run some old versions of PostgreSQL on old systems. The Visual Studio workflow is well known. It's good. It's described well in the manual. So let me show MCS2 and why I prefer that. So first line. Well, let's assume that we installed MCS2. It's pretty straightforward. And now I want to run. So I tell the first line is my Windows command prompt. So I'm saying run MCS2 shell with 64 toolchain. And then you see another prompt that's already bash, and I'm inside the bash. So I'm creating a directory. I'm entering into directory, change directory. Then I'm git clone OpenSSL just to show how can be built not only PostgreSQL but maybe some other stuff. Then I clone PostgreSQL itself. Then I'm going into OpenCCL, configure with the proper prefix, with the proper mean GW64 option at the end. Then I make clean, make install dev to have libraries, to have headers. And then I'm going to Postgres. I configure Postgres with a prefix, with OpenSSL. I tell configure where to look for include files, where to look for libraries for OpenSSL. And then, yes? Up. Up, okay. So, and then during configure, you must see that 6 lines that a library containing Krypton UX data is found, then library containing SSL is found, and that is okay. Then you just make Postgres. In that particular example, I built common stuff and I built interfaces only. So,
MCS2 does actually have a package for OpenSSL.
yes, it has, absolutely. I just wanted to show that we can do more. So, for example, if some hotfix were applied to OpenSSL and it's not yet available for as a package, you may just clone and do whatever you want. Yes, thank you. Okay, so we may build not only client, but we want to build some tools, client tools and libraries. So they are situated in interfaces, scripts, pgdump, base backup, and PSQL. And if you want to switch a toolchain and produce 32-bit programs, I don't think we need to, but if we want to, we do the same things, just we need to switch to provide another parameters, mean GUI32, and for configure mean GUI, and so on and so on. So again, the most interesting part is building extensions. The thing is that most of extensions are made for native development, not for Windows. So you cannot just use Microsoft Visual Studio to build them, because they are not supposed to be built by that toolchain. In that case, the only solution is to use MC or MCS2. So for extension, it looks like you are working in POSIX environment. And why? Because many extensions use pgconfig tool to know destinations of headers and dependencies and so on and so on. And they are using other tools, so configure and make and so on. And for example, yesterday I found PG sample to log extension, which is very good, and that functionality will be included in the new version 12 major release. And I was just, it's first time, I swear, I just try to build it, I make install, and then I check, yeah, we have extension. Okay, so what about other tools in our ecosystem? What about high availability? So standard de facto right now is probably Patroni. The authors of Patroni call it the template, meaning that you still need a lot of work to make it working, and it uses a distributed store like Zookeeper, etcd, console, or Kubernetes. It is written in Python for Linux, and now it has Windows support because of us, Cybertech. We have 2 clients which are in high demand for Patroni for Windows, and who we are to say no. So that's why now we have Windows port. It's not as good as Linux One. There is still a lot of issues, but they are mostly like warnings, not errors. And I know that several environments are running already our Patroni for Windows, so if you need one, you may find it in my GitHub. I mean, Windows part of it. Okay, summary. There is still a lot of Windows installation, and PostgreSQL is working fine. So the only question which disturbs me, how can we improve ecosystem? How can we provide more and more tools for Windows? And we know that Microsoft is moving very fast to the open source world with Citus data. So the question is not whether we like or not Windows. The question is how can we cope with it? How can we live with that? Here I have all links that you probably need to if you want to more details on that. I think that you will find it on the official PostgresOpen site. So questions, please, if any, of course. So thank you very much